Are You Leading by Example? Episode 46. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and today I wanted to do something a little bit different. This past week, I took a trip out to California, and I had the opportunity to speak on stage in front of an audience of 600 people. And I very specifically was sharing a personal story of something that has occurred for me. We called it a breakthrough, but a breakthrough that I've experienced over the past year that I chose to share on stage, and it hopefully inspire and impact the business owners in the room. And as I stood here deciding what to share today on the podcast, I realized why not share the same message with you. So I'm going to do a little bit of a longer version. I did this talk in 4.5 minutes, but I'm going to go just a little bit longer with you so I can share the full impact of what it is that I experienced, that I went through, and the journey. And I think that this might resonate with some of you, and for those that it does, hopefully it will help you figure out a way to make certain decisions in the way that you operate your life and the way that you operate your business. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into this. Back in January, I had a conversation with one of my coaches. I'm part of a coaching organization. There's multiple coaches in there, but in this particular instance, I was face-to-face with a coach at a live retreat that we were doing, and his name is Mark. And his session that he was working on us with was about peak performance as a leader. And I don't know exactly how it came up, but basically I shared with him that as a leader in my company and in my life, I struggle with the ability to care for myself. Basically, the number one purpose for everything that I do is driven by my number one core value, which is family. But more than just giving it a name, a core value, right? I'm a dad. I have children. I'm a husband. I have a wife. And I always put my wife's and my children's needs before my own. And what that looks like in real life is in the morning, I'm going to give my kids breakfast, and I'm going to get them dressed, and I'm going to get them off to the bus, and then I'm going to cook breakfast for my wife. And perhaps in the process, haven't made time to cook myself breakfast. So I'm either going to skip breakfast or I'm just going to throw the easiest thing in. So maybe I'll throw a piece of toast into the toaster oven and eat bread that is not nutritious and isn't good for me. But more often than not, I might skip the meal. Then I go to work. And because I put my family first and I'm always putting the needs of my kids first, I don't always get a full work day. And I might be the one, I work for myself. My wife works for an employer. She has to report to work at a certain time. So if anybody's running late, it's going to be my job to drop the kids off at daycare, or it's going to fall on me to take the kids to the doctor if they're sick, or even more than that, to have a sick child at home. And what happens is that my work day ends up being contracted. So now I'm trying to get all of my work done in a shorter period of time. So I'm skipping meals and I'm going without eating during the day. And of course, because I've got little kids and they wake up at unpredictable hours in the morning, I can't go to the gym first thing in the morning because what if they wake up and I'm not there? They need to be cared for in the morning. And my wife, she needs a lot of sleep. I could get away with 4 hours of sleep, but my wife needs 8 hours of sleep. So if they wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, it falls on me to take care of them. So I can't be at the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. This is the conflict of somebody who puts their family first, puts their wife first, or puts their spouse first. And that's how it played out in my life. And what that translated into was somebody who is not moving, not doing exercise, and not eating properly. I get to the end of the day, and I really didn't eat all day long. Finally get the kids to bed, and now it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm eating everything in sight in the kitchen. And that is the worst way to function from a health perspective for your body. So I shared with Coach Mark, this dilemma. And I said, what do I do? What is the solution to this quandary that I'm in? I just can't seem to prioritize my personal needs over everyone else's. And he shared with me two things, but the one that really impacted me was the following. He said, well, you really have demonstrated with what you're telling me that you really don't love your children. And I was quite taken aback by his response, and it triggered something in me. It triggered in me this deep, visceral reaction because of all people, I am the poster child of somebody who loves their children, or at least that's how I felt, right? When I got divorced, I was not the primary caregiver for my kids because I had a six-figure income and my ex-wife barely worked. So she was primarily like a stay-at-home mom. And so it made logical sense that she should have the kids the bulk of the time and I should have them once a week and every other weekend. And that ate me up inside, and it was definitely not an arrangement I should have agreed to in hindsight. But at the time, it made logical sense that that's the arrangement. And after a couple of years of this arrangement, or a few years, the kids started coming home every Wednesday. I would pick them up from school, and one of them would be sick, and I would take them to the doctor. And I thought that she didn't want to pay the copay for the doctor's visit, so she basically would just push whatever their symptoms were off until I had them on Wednesday, and I would take them to the doctor. I was living in my own little cocoon, little world, to really not see some other signs that showed up. But in 2013, I found out the truth, and that is that my ex-wife had become an alcoholic, and her alcoholism was driving her to do things that a parent should never be doing. Some of those things caused my children to be abandoned, traumatized. One example, she would often leave them home alone at night. And one night she went out, and they were, as usual, waiting up for her because they didn't want to go to sleep, not knowing that their mother was home. And it got really late. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and they finally decided amongst themselves that they're going to call her to see where she is. And when they picked up the phone and they dialed her phone number, her phone was answered by a taxi cab driver because she had left her phone in the back of a taxi. So here they are, young children at home by themselves, 3 in the morning, and they're unable to reach their mother. They have no idea where she is, and that is the situation that they were living with. So needless to say, when I discovered that this was happening, I got custody of my children. They moved in with me full time, and I began a process of helping them heal. And that process was extremely expensive for time and money. Basically, every penny that we had went to therapy and the legal bills. And every minute that I had outside of school time was spent chauffeuring my children to either therapists or meetings, Alateen meetings, which is Al-Anon is an organization for families of alcoholism. Alateen is for younger teenagers. And at that point in 2013, my girls were just on the cusp of being in that age group. And they didn't go to just one meeting. They went to, one daughter went to one meeting. The other two daughters went to a different meeting. So it was multiple meetings. I have three daughters from my first marriage and then three separate therapy sessions. So it was a lot. And I did this for a couple of years. I mean, I continued even more than a couple of years, but that was the heat of the healing period. That was the most expensive and the most trying, both time and money, and from a energy perspective. What I shared on stage is, if you've ever, this past 2 weeks ago, I went apple picking with my two youngest children, my 4-year-old son and my 2-year-old daughter. And while we were walking through the orchard, we were in a row, and I got distracted. I wasn't looking, and I turned back, and my son wasn't there. And immediately, I panicked and thought that he went missing. I called his name. He didn't respond. I turned to my wife. "Did you see Tyler?" She said, "Yeah, I think he just went over to the next row." But in the meantime, my throat had climbed into my chest, into my throat. Let me go back. My heart had climbed into my throat. My chest started pounding. I started to feel really constricted. And it's the same feeling, like parents who are listening to this, you know the feeling because you've experienced it either in the supermarket or some other public place where you just turned around. A moment ago, your child was there, and then the next moment they're not there, and you suddenly think that they've disappeared. Usually they're right there, but it's that moment of panic that ensues. That feeling that you feel in that moment, that is the feeling that I carried around for those 2 years that I didn't know if my children were going to be healthy again. I didn't know if they were going to be able to overcome this. I didn't know if they were going to, if the help I was getting them was the right help, if it would do what it needed to be done to help them be able to live life and move past the situation that they were exposed to, and the ongoing situation and trauma of having a parent that they can't talk to or don't have a good relationship with. So when my coach turned to me and said, "Well, it looks like you don't love your children," it created this visceral response because I had spent so much time and energy in getting my children's lives turned around. And I'm really proud of how they've turned out. My daughters are grown now. Like they're, 20, 18, and 17. They're very mature and very intelligent young ladies, and they are very well equipped to deal with life because of the situations that they've been through. And each of them has their own wonderful personalities, and I'm so proud of every single one of them. So Mark turned to me and he said, "Well, it looks like you don't love your children." And I immediately was startled by his response and didn't really know what to think of it. And then he went on to explain. He said, "Well, parenting, you can tell your children how you'd like them to act, what you'd like them to do. You can try to verbalize to them right from wrong. But they learn primarily by observing your actions. They learn primarily by watching what is it that you're doing. And they are watching you, and they are learning from you that they should prioritize everyone else's needs over their own, and they should not take care of their bodies. They should not put their own health and their own well-being at the top of the priority list." So is that what you would like to teach your children? Is that what you would like to demonstrate to them? Is that what you would like to be leading by example for them? Or would you like to demonstrate a different example for them? And it took me, the message hit home right away, but it took me a solid 6 months to really digest that message and to really allow it to start impacting how I was living my life. And that was in January. And in July, I finally decided that this is it. Like, I need to start looking at everything that I'm doing as an example for my children, for my spouse, for my community, for my employees, for my audience. And I need to just lead by example. So I started to ask myself this question. I started to ask myself, is this something that you would like to model for other people? Is this action you're about to take something that you would like to have broadcast out there for people to learn from? And if the answer is no, then I need to rethink whether I should do this particular thing. And this can lead to so many different areas of what we do. But for me, number one, it started a journey on my health journey, which I've shared pieces of this through previous episodes of the podcast. Don't know which episodes they were. I'm not going to reference them. But basically, I started living a healthy lifestyle at the beginning of July. Since then, I've lost over 30 pounds. I am much more in shape now than I've been. I even decided to race in a triathlon, and I trained for the triathlon, and I completed it. And I can now call myself a triathlete. As a matter of fact, I really enjoyed the process to the point that I'm now looking at races for next year to get more involved with the sport. But it also, I've just changed the way that I go about eating and that I go about exercise. And exercise is a priority. So if it means I need to take 2 more hours out of my workday to get that exercise in, then that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to figure out how to function with less time at the office. And this is where things get hairy or gray or difficult to digest as a business owner. So you own a law firm practice. You're listening to my message and you're saying, well, I would love to lead by example, but I really don't have the time to go to the gym. I really don't have the time to do this. And it doesn't need to be your physical health, your exercise, that this is just one example. And I'm going to share some other examples with you, but you might be asking yourself, how do you make the time? So I want to share with you some premise that I learned during understanding the profit first model, the cash flow model, which is shared, I believe, in episode 16 and 18 of this podcast. So with profit first, it's based on one of the pillars it's based on is Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law basically states that given a finite resource, our consumption of that resource is going to expand to the amount of the resource available. So, for example, the best example is the toothpaste example. So you have a tube of toothpaste, you got your toothbrush. Every night you go and you brush your teeth. So you put on toothpaste along the entire bristle of the toothbrush. As the toothpaste tube gets to the end and there's almost no toothpaste left and you need to start rolling it, squeezing it, pushing it up, and you're just eking out whatever toothpaste you can get out of that tube, what ends up happening is you start putting less toothpaste on your toothbrush. Now, what happened for the last 3 months, you needed to brush your teeth with the full length of the bristle, a nice big round roll of toothpaste on it, and now you're able to get away with half of that or a quarter of that, and you're able to function that way until that you can really get nothing out of the tube. So maybe for 2 or 3 weeks you're functioning that way before you start your next tube of toothpaste. What happened? Well, the reality is you didn't really need all of that toothpaste to begin with in order to brush your teeth properly and get your mouth clean. However, because it was available to you, you used it. This rule translates to time as well. And if you have 8 hours in your workday, you're going to fill those 8 hours, whether they're really productive or not. If you cut your workday down to 6 hours, you're going to figure out a way to still accomplish what needs to be accomplished in the 6 hours given. So there's not a direct correlation between the amount of time worked and the amount of productivity completed. Not only that, in in business, as the owner of a firm, you have other options. You have other ways of creating more time, which is to buy someone else's time. So you can contract work out. You can hire a staff member or multiple staff members to take over doing certain responsibilities. So you have even more flexibility than just cutting back your time and squeezing everything in to the time allotted. But you could hand off responsibilities and tasks to somebody else. So going back to my breakthrough and how I started to operate, I not only took this to my health journey, but I also took it to my business growth. And every morning when I start my day, I sit down and I prioritize my tasks. And I've talked about this before using the 90X planner. Some days I'm better at it than others. I'm a human being just like anybody else. But now I start asking myself this question, and that is, am I leading by example? With what I am doing, am I leading by example? And by asking that question, I am now giving myself another checkpoint, another place to make sure that my efforts are really being focused in the right place. And if the answer is no, then I need to change what my plan is for the day. I need to change what I'm doing. And sometimes leading by example means taking personal time and taking care of yourself and doing some self-care, because people need that. And if you don't take any time for self-care, then your staff members are going to think that they cannot take time for self-care either. So you're going to create burnout in your staff by showing an example of something that's not necessarily sustainable for somebody who's not the business owner. So these are the kinds of things that you need to start thinking about as you go through life, but as you go through running your law firm, is what is the example that I'm showing? Another really good one, and this one might fall on the abstract. You might have a hard time understanding this and wrapping your head around it, but what is the ideal client situation that you would like? So let's say that ideally you would charge $600 an hour to a client, and ideally you would take a retainer of $10,000 up front, and ideally they would always replenish their retainer right when it comes due, and you would not have to chase them for the money. I mean, let's just say that was your ideal. The question is do you treat your bills the same way? Do you make sure to pay your vendors right when the bill is due? Do you make sure to always replenish a retainer if you have one, or something of that nature with somebody else? Would you pay somebody $600 an hour as a professional for their services, or do you shop for the cheapest option on the block? You see, if you are not doing what you expect your clients to do, if you're not practicing the way that you expect your clients to practice, you're not going to be successful in getting those clients. Even if you got a client like that, they're going to change their pattern of behavior based on your model. And it doesn't have to be that you're advertising how you are. It gets picked up. Your behavior gets picked up, whether you realize it or not. Little things that you do, subtle things that you do get picked up by other people. They see it, and then they model what's okay, what's not okay in your world based on what you're doing. I have a business coach that I follow, and he says all the time that he'll get up on stage and he'll talk for 2 days at an event. And when he talks to his clients who sat there in the crowd and listened to everything he had to say for 2 days, and he asks them what did you learn the most from? More times than not, they tell him that they learned from something that they saw him do as opposed to something that they heard him say. And this is really what it all boils down to. Going back to my story, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before, so a week and a half ago, I went to a 5K. It's a race that a friend of mine puts on. He lost his son when he was 9 months old, and he started a charitable fund for him, the Happy Jack Fund. And they do a 5K every October to raise money for the charity, and it's a family fun event, and they have a kids race at the beginning. So I've always gone to the 5K and supported it. This is the 7th year that they had it, and the seventh year. Actually, I might have missed 1 year, but the 7th year or 6th year that I've been going, and I've never run the race. Some years I've walked it. Some years I've just hung out at the start and finish line and not gone anywhere. But this year I decided that because I had just come off of a triathlon and I was in shape and able to do it, I was going to take the opportunity and run the race. And they have this little kids race before the race starts. So we're there, and my 4-year-old son, Tyler, looks at me and he says, "Daddy, I want to race too." So I said, "Okay, no problem. Well, you can participate in this kids race." And the kids race is like a 400-meter dash. It's kind of like about a quarter of a mile. And he lines up at the start line, and he's the smallest kid there by far. Many of the kids are he just turned 4, and many of the kids are 5, 6, 7, and older. And the race starts, and everyone takes off running. And my son, he takes off running too, but these other kids are much faster than him, and within 15 seconds, he's running alone. They're all way ahead of him. And the video of him running is very inspirational, because just even for adults to watch a kid's determination at 4 years old, he doesn't question his ability to finish the race. He doesn't look at where are other people in the race. All he cares about is the fact that I'm running a race like my dad. And I watched him run that race as fast as he could without ever stopping. He kept checking over his shoulder to make sure that mommy and daddy were behind him, but he ran that race like a champ, and he crossed that finish line, and he was the proudest kid around. He got a little medal to hang over his neck, and he was so happy to be able to run a race like daddy. And that comes full circle, instant gratification to the entire purpose of why I prepared for the triathlon, why I turned around my life and made health such an important focus of my life, to be an example for my kids. And here's my 4-year-old, not only participating in a race, but he's loving it, and he's proud of it. And this could be a transformational change in his life at 4 years old, and all because of a decision that I made to ask myself that question: am I leading by example for my children? So I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to ask you this question, and that is, are you leading by example in your personal life, in your business life? Are you leading by example? And if not, is it possible that by starting to ask that question, by starting to add that into your repertoire, your toolkit of becoming a better person, a better leader, a better business owner, a better parent, a better friend, can you add that question to your arsenal to make you better in all those areas? And with that, I'm going to leave you and bid you a good day. I will see you on Thursday. We have an awesome guest coming up, so stay tuned. Take care, everybody. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.